Okay, let's talk about these questions. Number one, today's most popular question. And I have to say, good choice, because it's a very interesting question to talk about. So page 54, starting from the bottom of page 53, actually. So here's the situation. Young Charles is sick in bed. Anne is kneeling on the floor next to his bed, taking care of him. Also in the room are Charles Hayter and Captain Wentworth. Suddenly, Walter, 2 years old, breaks into the room, finds nothing better to do, starts annoying Anne. He began to fasten himself upon her. To fasten means to grab. So he grabs Anne as she knelt in such a way that, busy as she was about Charles, she could not shake him off. She spoke to him, ordered, entreated, which means begged, and insisted in vain. Once she did contrive to push him away, which means she succeeded, but the boy had the greater pleasure in getting upon her back again directly. Directly here means immediately. Walter, said she, get down this moment. You are extremely troublesome. I'm very angry with you. Walter, cried Charles Hayter. To cry means to shout. Why do you not do as you are bid? Why don't you do what we tell you to do? Do not you hear your aunt speak? Come to me, Walter. Come to cousin Charles. Cousin means family member because Charles Hayter is going to marry Henrietta. He's going to be family. But not a bit did Walter stir. Stir here means move. So he didn't go away. In another moment, however, Anne found herself in the state of being released from him. Someone was taking him from her, though he, this is Walter, had bent down her head so much that his little sturdy hands were unfastened from around her neck, and he was resolutely borne away, carried away, before she knew that Captain Wentworth had done it. So this is saying like he was climbing on her and he had pressed her head down. She can't see anything. And so only after he's taken away can she turn her head and realize that it's Captain Wentworth who had saved her. Her sensations, feelings on the discovery made her perfectly speechless. She could not even thank him. She could only hang over little Charles with most disordered feelings. His, Wentworth's, kindness in stepping forward to her relief, the manner or the way that he did it, the silence in which it had passed, the little particulars or the details of the circumstance. So put all of these together and then add the conviction or belief soon forced on her by the noise Wentworth was studiously making with the child, that he meant to avoid hearing her thanks, and rather sought to testify that her conversation was the last of his wants. So after taking Walter away, Wentworth is fussing over him, making a lot of noise, and this makes Anne think that he doesn't want to hear her say thank you. That in fact, he would rather not have a conversation with her. It's the last of his wants. It's the last thing that he wants is to talk to Anne. So put all of this together, produced such a confusion of varying but very painful agitation as she could not recover from till enabled by the entrance of Mary and the Miss Musgroves to make over her little patient to their cares and leave the room. So this situation made her so confused, she didn't know what to do or say until Mary, Henrietta, Louisa came back and she could leave the room and finally process what just happened. So the question is, what just happened? Why does she have such a strong reaction? A lot of you took this question and we discovered a few things together. First, As Charles Hayter says, Anne is Walter's aunt. Charles Hayter is Walter's future cousin or future uncle. Wentworth is a stranger. He's not a part of the family. So he's actually interfering in this family situation. He doesn't have the right to order around or to do anything to the young Walter, but he does it anyway. So first of all, it's very impolite, but secondly, he's acting like a family member. And that makes Anne think, okay, well, if he is a family member, that means that we got married in the past. It makes her remember their relationship, makes her remember that they're not actually married. So it brings up these painful memories. Secondly, as it says, he said nothing. The silence. As a stranger, he's supposed to say, do you need help? Is there anything I can do? He needs to wait for an invitation. He doesn't wait. He just does it like a family member. But also the silence, and then add the third one, which is it looks like he doesn't want to have a conversation with her. Makes Anne think that he still hates her. In other words, Anne just got saved by a man who hates her. Very confusing. So if you put these three things together, you can imagine how confused Anne feels. And of course, she still loves him, which adds more fuel to the fire of her feelings. Question 2. Nobody took this question, so it's my question. Does Mary have too much of the Elliot pride? So we know that Mary cares a lot about her family history. So this is on their long walk when they go over the hill and they sit down and take a rest. At that moment, this is on page 58. Mary, finding a comfortable seat for herself on the step of a stile, so like on the stepping stone part of the fence, was very well satisfied, so long as the others all stood about her. So if Mary is the only person sitting, she's happy. But when Louisa drew Captain Wentworth away to try for a gleaning of nuts in an adjoining hedgerow, and they were gone by degrees quite out of sight and sound, Mary was happy no longer. So once some people go away and do other things and have a good time, suddenly Mary is not happy anymore. She quarreled with her own seat, which means she felt like something was wrong with where she's sitting. Was sure Louisa had got a much better somewhere. She's thinking Louisa must have found a better place to sit. And nothing could prevent Mary from going to look for a better also. So this is a good example, right? Mary feels like she has to be treated the best. And we know from last week when they were talking about the taking care of the young children, right? Everybody is complaining to Anne. Somewhere in there, I think Henrietta says that Mary should not be so impolite with Mrs. Musgrove, Grandma Musgrove. Everybody agrees Mary is the mother. Mary has the right to decide how to take care of her own children, but she doesn't have to keep reminding everybody of this fact. So yeah, these are some examples of the fact that Mary is not just proud, but she's also proud because she was born into the Elliot family, a noble family that cares about the fact that they are a noble family. And she marries Charles, who is not a noble. And so to her, to Mary, all of these people are just common people. They're not nobles. Mary is the only noble here, and so Mary must be treated better than everybody else. That would seem to be the Elliot pride. Question 3. Some of you took this question today. What does that mean? Bennick is older, but younger in feeling. Very strange. Let's take a look. '65, the second paragraph, the one after the really long paragraph. And yet, said Anne to herself as they now moved forward to meet the party, Bennick has not perhaps a more sorrowing heart than I have. Maybe I feel more sadness than he does. I cannot believe his prospects so blighted forever, which means prospects here means marriage prospects, possibility of getting married in the future. Blighted means dead. So this sentence means that I believe he may one day marry again. And from these 2 points, her conclusion is he is younger than I am, younger in feeling, if not in fact, younger as a man. He will rally again. Here it means he will walk out of his heartbreak. He will rise again and be happy with another person, another woman. So why does this make him younger in feeling? Why does Anne feel this way? Well, the key point is here. He might marry again in the future, and he might get over his heartbreak. What happened to Bennick? He was engaged to Fanny, Captain Harville's sister, but Fanny said that they should wait until he had money before they get married. So Bennick went to sea, and then Fanny died. And now Bennick keeps thinking, oh, I should have married her while she was still alive. I shouldn't have waited. So Anne here is saying that it's possible he might marry someone in the future. It's possible he might get over his heartbreak. The idea is Fanny's dead. He's not going to get her back. One day he might accept this fact and fall in love with someone else. But Anne thinks that she has a worse situation than Bennick. Anne thinks she will never get over her heartbreak. She will never marry someone else. Why not? Well, because Wentworth is still alive. Not only is he still alive, he's staring her in the face every week. So how do you get over somebody when you have to talk to them every week? How can you think that it's really, really over when there's always that thought in your mind, maybe one day, maybe. And so Anne is thinking, Bennick might get over it, but I never will. And that makes me older in feeling. I understand more and more deeply about the hearts of men and women. I understand the true sorrow of this life. So if that is the standard, then what about the second part of the question? Is there somebody else who might have the same sorrow, the same depth of feeling in this book? I mean, I guess the only real comparison is Wentworth, right? He's also a guy who's facing his ex every week. He also still feels some kind of attraction to her. But even Wentworth is better, has a better situation than Anne because he is almost going to marry Louisa. He has another choice right there. Maybe if he did marry Louisa, he would still love Anne, but he would still find some kind of happiness in his new life. Whereas for Anne, at this moment, there is no other choice. Later on, we meet a guy named Mr. Elliot, but at this point, he has not yet appeared. And of course, even after we meet Mr. Elliot, Anne never seriously considers marrying him. Another possible answer might be Admiral Croft and Lady Croft. They have, I think, the happiest marriage in the family, in the novel. And the key to a happy marriage is not pretending to have a happy marriage. It's to really understand your spouse, to really understand your partner. So they must also have a deep relationship with each other, a deep sense of understanding of what it means to live life with someone you love every day on the sea or on land, whatever happens. But you know, most everybody, uh, nobody can compare to Anne's situation. Like she is the saddest person. She is the most forlorn, abandoned, romantic person in the book. Question 4, nobody took this question. Poetry and prose, 67, 68. Actually, this scene appeared in the movie, so maybe this can remind you. So Anne gets to talking with Bennick, and they talk about what they read. Yeah, let's start here. 3 lines from the bottom. So now he's reciting poetry. He repeated with such tremulous feeling the various lines of poetry which imaged a broken heart. Okay, pay attention. Image is not imagine. To imagine is to create an image in your head. To image is a word we don't use a lot today as a verb. What it means is to present a picture of. So he's reciting lines of poetry that to him describe a broken heart. Or a mind destroyed by wretchedness. Wretchedness here means sadness. And looked so entirely as if he meant to be understood. So it looks like the reason he's saying all these poetry is so that somebody can understand him. So that Anne ventured to hope he did not always read only poetry. Venture means to attempt. Hope actually here means she tried to say that she hopes he doesn't always read poetry. So this is actually saying that she says this. She tells him this. And to say that she thought it was the misfortune of poetry to be seldom safely enjoyed by those who enjoyed it completely. Very interesting. If you can truly feel the poetry, it is not safe. Very interesting. And that the strong feelings which alone could estimate it truly, estimate here means give it value. So only if you have strong enough feelings will you truly understand the value of poetry. But these feelings were the very feelings which ought to taste it but sparingly. Sparingly means occasionally. So Anne is saying to really understand poetry, you need to have powerful feelings. But these powerful feelings can be dangerous. So if you do have these powerful feelings, you should not read so much poetry. The thing that helps you understand poetry is the same thing that means you should not read so much poetry. So after she tells him this, his looks showing him not pained, but pleased. So first of all, the British used to spell show S-H-E-W. This is just S-H-O-W. So Anne notices that Bennick doesn't seem hurt, he seems pleased. With this allusion to his situation, he's happy because Anne understands him. She was emboldened to go on. She felt like she could continue giving him advice. and feeling in herself the right of seniority of mind. So because in her mind she felt older than Bennick, seniority, older, she ventured to recommend a larger allowance of prose in his daily study. So in his daily reading, he should read more prose. And on being requested to particularize, so he asked her, okay, what should I read? She mentioned such works of our best moralists, people who tell you what is right and what is wrong, how you should behave. Such collections of the finest letters, such memoirs of characters of worth and suffering. Memoirs is like the personal life story, 回忆录, of characters of worth and suffering. Worth means value, and suffering. Okay, so people who have suffered. These people, or these works of prose, occurred to her at the moment as calculated to rouse and fortify the mind. So she's thinking if he reads these things, they can help him get over his heartbreak, can help strengthen his mind by the highest precepts. Precept here just means concepts or like moral values, ideas. So the highest level of ideas can help him grow stronger. And the strongest examples of moral and religious endurances. To endure means to live through something painful. Okay, so we have some ideas. We talked about poetry. You need powerful feelings, but those feelings are dangerous. So how do you protect yourself from those powerful feelings? Anne says you should read some other things, other prose works. Moralists, we can understand, right? They can give you ideas about how to live a better life. Letters, quite interesting. These are records of how people talk to each other, how they think about and relate to each other, how they communicate with each other. Each letter is like a little window on a different relationship. So today we would say that reading letters can give Bennick perspective, can give him a new perspective, a different perspective, a broader perspective. It can make his heartbreak feel smaller. It's kind of like, everybody goes through heartbreak in their life. You're not special. It can help him get over that pain. And the memoirs of important and valuable people, also always a good suggestion, right? Read the life stories of great and important people. But what about this? Suffering. And this, endurance. Well, Bennick is also suffering. Bennick is also enduring heartbreak. So maybe Anne is thinking, if he can read about how other people have overcome suffering, it can help him overcome his suffering. And then finally, these are religious endurances. So one last item is maybe if Bennick turns to God, he can get over his heartbreak faster. And the idea is because Christians always say God has a plan, right? It's not random. He's not punishing you. There is a plan. You don't have to worry. And then the second part, do you agree? Like, I agree to a point. It's true if you read things that have good ideas in them, hopefully you will pick up those ideas. But we also read prose not just for the ideas, but also for the literary content. How does the author use language? How does the author see the world? Even if the perspective is not like morally strong or like the best examples, we can still learn. We can still be affected. Even if we read the stories of people who are not great. It's always a different perspective. It's always something we can consider in terms of the possibilities of life. And we can use these ideas to think about what kind of life do we want? And this person's values, are they the same as my values? So I agree with most of it, but the one part I don't agree with is you should only read the morally correct stuff. I think you can read everything and learn from whatever you read. And question 5, some of you took this question. Comparing Anne and Louisa. So here, this is just after Louisa's accident. If you remember, Louisa jumps into Wentworth's arms from a great height. He catches her. She decides to do it again. The second time, he doesn't catch her. And, you know, each time everybody says, don't do it. It's too high. It's not safe. But Louisa doesn't listen. So back when Anne broke up with Wentworth, I guess, told her in a letter or somehow, we don't have evidence, but he let her know that he's looking for a wife with firmness of character, someone who can make up her own mind, who doesn't just follow orders. Sounds good, right? But then you have Louisa. Everybody's warning her, don't do it, it's too dangerous. She doesn't listen. She cannot be persuaded. Unlike Anne, who was persuaded not to marry Wentworth. So if Wentworth is really looking for a woman with firmness of character, would Louisa's accident change his mind? Anne is hoping yes, because if Wentworth no longer cares that much about firmness of character, that would mean he no longer cares so much that Anne was persuaded to break up with him. And therefore, it gives her a little more hope that maybe they will get back together. The delusions of the love struck. 恋爱脑的一些幻想. But we're not in love with Wentworth, I hope. So we can think about this. Does this comparison make sense? I talked to 2 groups about this question. Both groups said the comparison does not make sense. One group mentioned that Anne and Louisa are from 2 completely different backgrounds. Anne, a family who doesn't support her, who doesn't love her, but Anne is still smart and independent and in control most of the time, despite her family. It's only at the moment of crisis, when everybody is telling her don't marry Wentworth, that is one of the few moments where she allows herself to be persuaded. Versus Louisa, a family that loves her and supports her. Nobody really disagrees with her. Nobody gives her anything to argue about. So really, we don't know how Louisa would act in a crisis. It's not a good comparison, according to this answer, because Wentworth is comparing Anne in a crisis against a family that doesn't support her, versus Louisa not in a crisis with a family that always supports her. You can't tell who has firmness of character from this kind of comparison. The other group also said it's a bad comparison because really what Wentworth is looking at isn't firmness of character. What Wentworth is really looking at is control over one's own emotions. Louisa, very impulsive, wants to do it, so she does it. Doesn't think too much. Anne thinks very carefully and clearly about her situation. She originally wanted to marry Wentworth. That was her own rational decision. But in the end, she gave away to pressure. So really, Wentworth doesn't want someone with firmness of character. He wants somebody who can make a rational decision and stick to it. So the comparison doesn't make sense because he's looking at the wrong thing. Okay, so those are today's discussion questions. Do you have other thoughts? Okay, so before next week, please finish up to chapter 16. And we have a little time left, so I'll guide you in reading chapter 13, the beginning of chapter 13. Page 79. So this is after the accident and after Anne gets sent back to Uppercross. She only has a few days left before she's going to join Lady Russell to go off to Bath and rejoin her family. The remainder of Anne's time at Uppercross, comprehending, which means comprising, which means constituted by or made up of, only 2 days, was spent entirely at the mansion house, the great house. And she had the satisfaction of knowing herself extremely useful there, both as an immediate companion and as assisting in all those arrangements for the future, which in Mr. and Mrs. Musgrove's distressed state of spirits would have been difficulties. So, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Musgrove are still very upset about Louisa's accident. They can't handle all of the planning for moving around. So Anne got to help out with the planning and the arrangements. They had an early account from Lyme the next morning. Account here means a report. Louisa was much the same. No symptoms worse than before had appeared. Charles came a few hours afterwards to bring a later and more particular account. Again, particular means detailed. He was tolerably cheerful, so not very happy, but not too sad either. Okay, tolerably cheerful. A speedy cure must not be hoped, so Louisa is not going to recover very quickly. But everything was going on as well as the nature of the case admitted. Things were going as well as could be. Admit here means allow. In speaking of the Harvilles, he seemed unable to satisfy his own sense of their kindness. So he feels so much gratitude to the Harville's kindness that he can't fully express his feelings. He cannot satisfy the need to express his feelings. That's how thankful he is. I guess in Chinese we would say something like 明谢一日言外 or something like that. Impossible to express how thankful he is. Especially of Mrs. Harville's exertions as a nurse. Exertion here means effort. She really left nothing for Mary to do. If you remember from the movie, Mary begged to be left to take care of her sister-in-law. Everybody thought it was a bad idea. We know Mary is not a very caring person, but Mary begged to be left, and so they left Mary there. And here Charles is saying that really it's Mrs. Harville that's doing everything. Mary's not really doing anything. He and Mary, this is Charles, had been persuaded to go early to their inn last night. An inn is a hotel. I guess a motel today. Mary had been hysterical again this morning, so she's also going crazy again this morning. In Chinese, we call this 歇斯底里. When he came away, she was going to walk out with Captain Benwick, which, he hoped, would do her good. He almost wished she had been prevailed on to come home the day before. To be prevailed on means to be persuaded to come home the day before. But the truth was that Mrs. Harville left nothing for anybody to do. Charles was to return to Lyme the same afternoon, and his father had at first half a mind to go with him, but the ladies could not consent. They wouldn't let Mr. Musgrove go to Lyme. It would be going only to multiply trouble to the others and increase his own distress. So, Mrs. Harville is taking care of everything. So if Mr. Musgrove goes, he would only be causing more trouble. And it would also make him feel more painful when he sees Louisa lying in bed. And a much better scheme or plan followed and was acted upon. They came up with a better plan and they followed that plan. A chase, this is a kind of horse-drawn car, was sent was sent for from Crewkerne, and Charles conveyed back a far more useful person in the old nursery maid of the family. So, they're a rich family. They have what today we would call a babysitter to help take care of the babies. So instead of Mr. Musgrove, the chase carries the babysitter to Lyme. One who, having brought up all the children and seen the very last, the lingering and long-petted Master Harry, sent to school after his brothers, was now living in her deserted nursery, to mend stockings and dress all the blains and bruises she could get near her. So this babysitter raised all the children. She raised the youngest child, Harry. And after Harry went to school, she has nothing more to do. So she's living in the nursery. The nursery is the baby room. Deserted because there are no more babies. Abandoned nursery to mend stockings, to fix socks, basically. And dress all the blains and bruises. A blain is a chilblain. Today we call it frostbite. When you're so cold that your body gets hurt. And so she is now taking care of their hurts and injuries and wounds. Blains and bruises, right? Bruise is when something happens to your skin. 就是皮肤伤. And so she was only too happy in being allowed to go and help nurse dear Miss Louisa. Nurse is a verb. It means to take care of. Vague wishes of getting Sarah thither. Sarah is the name of the nursery maid. Thither means there. Vague wishes of getting Sarah thither had occurred before to Mrs. Musgrove and Henrietta, but without Anne, it would hardly have been resolved on and found practicable so soon. So they had already thought of this, but it was Anne who said, good idea, we should do it. To resolve on means to decide. And practicable means it's something that can be done. It's possible. So once again, Anne is the MVP. They were indebted the next day to Charles Hayter for all the minute knowledge of Louisa. So the next day, Charles Hayter comes. He makes his report, and it's a very careful and detailed report about Louisa. Minute means small. Here it means every single detail. Indebted means thankful. The old way of saying thank you is I am in your debt. 我欠你一个. So here it just means thankful. The minute knowledge of Louisa, which it was so essential to obtain every 24 hours. Everybody really wanted to know what's going on. Is she getting better? He made it his business to go to Lyme, and his account was still encouraging. Still means always. So just like the previous account by Charles Musgrove, his account was also very encouraging. The intervals of sense and consciousness were believed to be stronger. An interval is a period of time. So this sentence means that the times when Louisa is awake, seemed to be stronger. She seemed to be awake longer. She seemed to have a better sense of what's going on. She's getting better. Every report agreed in Captain Wentworth's appearing fixed in line. I love this detail so much. Again, Captain Wentworth is absolutely not important to the story of Louisa. The only reason this sentence is part of the report is because Anne is waiting for news about Wentworth. She cares, and that's why the novel tells us this information. And what is the information? Wentworth is to be fixed in line. Fixed means he's not moving. He's not going anywhere. He's not coming back. Anne is not going to see him anytime soon. So even during this emergency, when everybody is so worried about Louisa, Anne is still also thinking about Wentworth and trying to prepare herself for when the next time she might see him could be. Okay, let's stop here. Have fun reading for next week.